Welcome back, class. This is Steve Cole with your PARM 2223 Unit 15 lecture on the future of EMS, Part 3. Part 3, gentlemen and ladies, let's jump right into it. So I left you off with a little teaser about Reboa, and I want you to just take a minute, pause. Have you heard about this? Have you not? Many of you had not heard of ECMO. This is closely related in skill set and innovation to ECMO, but it's not ECMO. And this is actually really freaking cool also. So this is resuscitative endovascular balloon occlusion of the aorta. Reboa, as it's commonly called. And like ECMO, like many of these innovations, they've actually been around for a while. Now, Reboa was first described in literature by the U.S. military in 1954 during the Korean War. And it was a lieutenant colonel, a battlefield surgeon, who used this to save one particular soldier's life with uncompressible abdominal hemorrhage or junctional hemorrhage, and two other soldiers he described that could have survived but didn't because they didn't have this available. So it's only taken us 50, 60, 70 years to where this is becoming more common. So let's dig into it. What is Reboa? Well, the truth is it's exactly what it sounds like. So it's resuscitative occlusion, balloon occlusion of the aorta. So you insert a balloon through the groin into the aorta, from the femoral artery into the aorta, and then you occlude it. So if you can take, let me get my little pointer out here. You can see where they go in through with a catheter, just like a central line. The process for this is very similar to a central venous catheter in the femoral area, but not just placing a central venous catheter like we used to in pre-hospital setting. You have to actually use the Schlesinger technique, so you slide a wire down it, pull your initial catheter out, stick a dilator, dilate the hole. It requires basic surgical skills. By basic surgical skills, I mean the ability to use a scalpel and ability of the anatomy, to know the anatomy, and then you insert the catheter, the balloon catheter up, and you have to have it placed in what they call zone 3, which is just below the renal artery, so the kidneys still get blood flow, and you occlude it. And what's this for? Well, this is for the patients who have life-threatening, non-compressible junctional hemorrhage or pelvic trauma or lower abdominal trauma, so gunshot wounds, stuff like that. And by sliding this up and you occlude it, you stop all bleeding, because you stop all blood flow below the balloon. This is part of what they call damage control resuscitation. All out, I almost said a bad word, all out, be to the wall, no holds barred, kicking death in his ass, damage control resuscitation. So this is for auto accidents, motorcycle accidents, gunshot trauma, battlefield trauma, so on and so forth. And it's been around a while. So I have this animation that illustrates this. I'll let it play here. But if you want a better image of it, I actually put this animation in the resources for this unit. There it says Unit 3 video optional or something like that. So you can download it and look, or not download it, but open up and look at it on a bigger screen, so on and so forth. So there you are, identifying the femoral artery. Standard percutaneous central venous access, non-tunneled. Non-tunneled. So this is a standard 16 or 14 gauge catheter, probably a 16. You will slide the wire down, which has a balloon on the end of it, up through the aorta. And you can see there, that's the guide wire. Now comes the catheter. Now this process, this is the Schlesinger technique. It's exactly the same that you use to place large central venous catheters. You use to place hemodynamic monitoring. You use for cardiac caths. you use for interventional radiology. This process up to this point is a skill set that is used in ECMO in lots of different procedures. So this is in and of itself, the skill set is not innovative. It's the device and the way it's being used. So he's got the large catheter now. He slides a bigger balloon and catheter over the wire. And then they inflate. There we go. And you guys get the idea. Now, I will say, this is pretty important, is that they've tried different placements, different areas. I think this is a little bit higher than what we normally see. You see this is up just outside the heart. It can actually be placed. Oh, there's the renal arteries right about there. And occluded. And it just depends on where you need to place it to stop the hemorrhage. Does that make sense? So this is what the catheter looks like. Again, this is placed over a guide wire once you've dilated the vein. This is an example. Amazing what they have with technology these days. And is this, where is this in the innovation curve? Where is this in the acceptance? Well, this is the UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Cowley Shock Trauma Center. Cowley as in R. Adams Cowley, the father of trauma medicine, the inventor of the golden hour. Okay? And this is the trauma center that was the first trauma center of its kind. And you can see here, let me get my little pokey dot back. Oops. Here's our pointer. You can see Reboa right there. Reboa versus thoracotomy, where they, this is for torso, in the upper torso. In the upper torso, zone 1, they're looking at just cracking the chest. In the lower torso, middle torso, they're going back and forth between Reboa or emergency thoracotomy. And for lower zone, in the pelvis or abdomen, they're looking at Reboa or pelvic packing. Now, pelvic packing you can only do in the OR. You need to literally open them up and pack and try to stop all the bleeding until you can find the bleeder. So this is a temporizing measure. This is something that is used to keep the patient alive until they reach the OR. So very limited time, an hour, 2 hours tops. Here's their algorithm. It's very simple, like all their algorithms are. Notice right there, fast positive. Fast is an ultrasound. We talked about that earlier. The question is, what about, will this ever leave the ER? Will this ever leave the big cities? Well, London HIMSS right now has actually practiced this. They have a procedure, they have protocol, and they've actually done it at least once. I think they've done it a couple times with where they saved. I know one person was I think she is a lady who was injured in a severe motorcycle accident, saved her life. I think she was in cardiac arrest when they did it. The other one, I'm not so sure about. But this was proof of concept. It can be done successfully in the field. It can be done successfully in the field, just like ECMO in the field. So where are we at this? Well, we're still innovating on this. There's a new thing out called partial Reboa. And the concern is that when you occlude the aorta, everything below it becomes ischemic. So you're talking about the bowel. If you do it too high, you're talking about the kidneys. If you, which does no good to get them through surgery and get the bleeder stopped if they die of peritonitis later. So what do you do? Well, this idea of partial Reboa is you will inflate it to the appropriate pressure and occlude for 10 to 15 minutes to give a chance for the blood to clot, for the bleeder to stop. And then you will deflate it just enough to allow about half a liter a minute blood flow to keep ischemia at bay, and this is doubled the time that they can keep Ebola in place, up to about 2 hours or so. At least that's what the early stages are. So this is probably the way Ebola will look if it ever gets in the pre-hospital setting. So where are we? Well, pretty much we're definitely in the dependent stage. We are not in the decoupling stage as far as the pre-hospital setting, because really you won't find this in every ER just yet. We are definitely dependent. It's dependent on the large urban trauma centers, ATLS certified physicians with specialty training, trauma surgeons, and specialty helicopter services. For now. So we're in the front end of this innovator curve. What are the dependencies? What do we need to go from here to distribution? Well, I want to talk about that, but I think the first thing is, right now in the United States, you will never see paramedics as we know them today, do this. The skill set that is involved is something you see really existing at mid-level providers and higher. So we're talking PAs, critical care nurse practitioners, intensivist physicians, so on and so forth. So, are there mid-level paramedics today? No. But will there be in the future? Possibly. So there's been a lot of things put forth about what mid-level paramedics could do, and there's different models in community paramedicine, self-prescribed, and so on. So I'll talk about this in a few minutes. But I think the most interesting concept of mid-level master's prepared paramedics is that of the master resuscitationist. And do I think it would truly be a true paramedic, or will I think it will be a PA with specialty training? I'm not sure, but I think in 10 years you will see something like that, and I'll talk about that more. Let's look at ECMO CPR. We talked about this very early on in one of the early modules. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, other than say that this is definitely still in the future realm of pre-hospital CPR, pre-hospital care. Here what we see physicians training on this with mannequins. We know it was done in the Paris subway. We know it's been done in other settings. We know there is pre-hospital ECMO in the United States, but with physicians. So where are we at on this? Well, we're still in the dependent stage. Specially trained physicians, specialty equipment, still developing proof of concept. Has not reached a decoupling stage in either the ER or pre-hospital setting yet. Emphasis on yet. Now, what are things that really freed up? Well, A, there's the financial things, and we talked about reimbursement, so on and so forth. And B, the other side of it is education. You need to have the providers who are appropriately trained to do this in the field and to develop best practices and decouple it and then distribute it. But I think we're going to get there. The evidence for improved outcomes with this is fairly substantial. Let's completely switch gears and talk about EMS body cams. EMS body cams. So this has gotten quite a bit of stuff lately. Last module you saw I don't want to say the adverse consequences, but one of the consequences, I think it's a good consequence of body cams, when we saw that the body cam footage of the crappy way that those pre-hospital providers treated that patient in South Carolina. What if we had body cams on everything, on all of our calls? Would we be proud of what we do? Would it improve if we knew we were being watched? They call it the Hawthorne effect, that just being watched sometimes improves our behavior. If we knew we were being watched, would we have better accountability? That's a good question. I'm interested from a different perspective. One, it reduces complaints. When people say we stole something, people said we did something, we have the footage to prove whether we did or did not. And we know that is absolutely true from the law enforcement experience. What I'm really interested is in medical error reduction. We know there are certain practices that reduce medical errors, such as cross-checking and so on and so forth. But how often are they being done? Well, if we are using body cams to review critical calls, we will see if they're following best practices to reduce medical errors. We will see, now this is the big one, if their documentation matches what they actually did. Because I can tell you, there used to be expression on creative charting. It didn't matter how good you actually ran the call as long as you charted it well. And, you know, I wish I could say that that's gone away, but that's not necessarily the case. And of course, there's still people that do crappy charting too. But body-worn cameras can help reduce medical errors. And this has been proven. This has actually been studied in a few pilot projects. What I'm really interested in is training opportunities. Now, 10, 15 years ago, Seattle King County actually had a battalion chief vehicle with a paramedic, what they call a medical service officer, and a film crew that followed ambulances on cardiac arrest calls. There's a little pilot project. And when they'd pull up, they would film everything. I mean, everything. And it was for training. They had waivers, so on and so forth. It was pretty amazing the way they did it. But they had an organizational commitment. Now, then, that was a very expensive project to undertake. Body cams were not a thing. They are now. What I'm getting at is these videos were used to train future paramedics. And these videos are powerful. We can do simulation. We can do some really realistic simulation if you throw the money at it and stuff like that. But it doesn't... The best simulation, which is very powerful from training perspective, pales against being able to review actual calls and critique them in a structured, organized, educationally valid way. But the only way we can get that is through body cams, seeing what the paramedic sees, seeing it in the moment, processing that, reflecting on it, and then learning from it. This is what excites me about body cams. The other stuff is your justification. But as an educator, this is what excites me because this can really improve what we do. It's no different than having helmet cams and structure fires. It really isn't. Or body cams on cops. And we're being recorded anyway. We know this, you know this, we all know this. Everything we go on, we are having people FaceTiming. Just today, our physician was talking about a case in the ER where they had somebody wearing Google Glass, some version of Google Glass, and recorded the AMA process and filed a complaint saying they were coerced to walk out the door or something like that. I'm not sure the exact details, but the recording is happening anyway. The one benefit of body cams is we are able to then make sure the entire truth gets looked at, not just the part they want to edit and show the public or show the news channels. So where are we at on this? Well, I don't think it's dependent. And the reason it's not dependent is because we have the technology. Widespread, the best practices we can adapt from law enforcement and fire and other agencies. It's been decoupled. It's not dependent anymore. And the question is distribution. Who pays for it? Again, it's the financial barrier to remove a financial incentive or to remove financial barriers. Those are two things that will push it forward here. So you might think, okay, so we're in our innovators. No, we're in the early adopters. And the reason why I say that is there are some agencies that have been using body cams since 2016. They have best practices that are being developed, and it is going to be a thing. So I'd like you to think about this and decide, what are your thoughts? Is this a thing? Now with that, I'm going to end this portion of the lecture. The next one is really short, but we're at 20 minutes. So we're going to briefly review some other future innovations that in the distant future I want you to consider. So thank you for your time, and I'll see you when we come back.